You buy a new car, let's say it's red, you drive it off the lot and suddenly, everywhere you look, there are red cars. Not just a few. Dozens. On every street, every parking lot, every highway you take home. Yesterday, you would have sworn those cars were rare. Today, they are impossible to miss. Nothing changed. The red cars were always there, but your brain was not looking for them, and that distinction matters more than it seems. In 1994, a reader of a Minnesota newspaper wrote in to describe a strange experience. He had just learned about a German terrorist group called the Baader-Meinhof gang. Within days, he started encountering the name everywhere. Articles, conversations, random references he had never noticed before. The newspaper named the experience after the group, and the term stuck. What that reader experienced was not coincidence. It was not a sign from the universe. It was a feature of human cognition so reliable that researchers have been studying it ever since. It has another name in psychology: frequency illusion. Once your brain encounters something new and registers it as significant, it begins pulling that thing out of the background. Before the encounter, your brain was filtering it out to save processing power. After the encounter, the filter is gone. This happens with words. You learn the word sonder, and then you hear it in a song, in a book, in a podcast within the same week. It happens with names. Someone mentions the name Callum, and suddenly 3 people named Callum appear in your life. It happens with ideas. You read about intermittent fasting, and suddenly everyone around you seems to be doing it. But here is where the phenomenon gets stranger, because it does not stop at objects and words. Think about a conversation you had recently with someone you had never spoken to before. Maybe it was brief, a stranger at a coffee shop, a new colleague at work, someone you were introduced to at an event. The conversation ended, you went your separate ways, and then you started seeing that person. In the hallway, in the same grocery store, at a restaurant across the room, places you had been to hundreds of times before, places where, statistically, that person was probably also present before, but you never noticed them. Now you cannot stop noticing them. This is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon operating in its most personal and disorienting form, because with objects, the experience is curious. With people, it feels like something more. It feels like the world is nudging you toward that person, like something is trying to tell you something. That feeling is not real. But it is not random either. The moment you had that first interaction, your brain did something very specific. It moved that person from the background of your perception to the foreground, from noise to signal. And once something becomes signal, your brain cannot unsee it. Researchers call this selective attention. Your brain cannot process everything in your environment equally. At any given moment, your senses are receiving roughly 11 million bits of information per second. Your conscious mind can only handle about 40 of them. Something has to decide what gets through, and that something is a small cluster of cells at the base of your brainstem. It is called the reticular activating system, and it functions like a personal filter for reality. Its job is to decide, in real time, what is relevant to you and what is not. When you learn something new, meet someone new, or buy something new, you signal to it that this thing matters, and it adjusts the filter accordingly. This is why athletes who visualize their performance before a game are not just doing a mental exercise, they are literally training their reticular activating system to notice the physical cues they need during the game. It is why people who write down their goals are statistically more likely to achieve them, not because of motivation. Because the act of writing tells the RAS. This goal is signal, not noise. And it is why the moment you learned about the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon just now, you will almost certainly start noticing it everywhere. That is not irony, that is the mechanism demonstrating itself in real time. But there is something worth sitting with underneath all of this. If your brain decides what you notice, and you can influence what your brain decides to notice, then, in a very real sense, you have some control over what your reality looks like. The person who focuses on everything going wrong will have a reticular activating system finely tuned to find more of it. The person who focuses on what is working will find their brain surfacing evidence of that. Instead, you are not seeing the world as it is, you are seeing the world as your brain has been instructed to filter it. The red cars were always there. The question is what you have been telling your brain to look for. If you made it this far, you are probably the kind of person who will enjoy what comes next. Subscribe and the algorithm will do the rest.